All right. Three, two, one. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Baseball Outside the Box. I'm your host, Pete Caliendo. Thanks for joining us, everybody in the US and around the world. Appreciate it. We're in over 100 countries. Hey, keep doing us a favor. Keep sharing the show. It really helps out. Don't worry about the levels of baseball because we hit them all. Anywhere from youth level, the most important, the volunteer coaches, all the way to the major league coaches. And all our guests come from all over in the US and the world. So again, thanks for joining us and welcome again, ESPN Honolulu, our great friends there. We really appreciate you joining the show and check it out because we're going to be having some baseball coaches from Honolulu and from Hawaii. So aloha, my friends. And before we start, just like to mention, hey, we have a great friends in Japan. You know, do a lot of work in Japanese baseball. They are going to be a sponsor of the show. SIS, it's the Solutions Integrity Services. Yeah, no, they're not a baseball company, but they are baseball people, great baseball people. Matter of fact, the owner is a baseball coach in Japan, and they do a lot of things like install telephone systems, PCs, and workshops, design network systems for you. They even do the sales of the network equipment, the equipment relocation and cabling. They've got all kinds of service, electrical work, client support and management services for IT equipment. It's an IT company in Japan, but they have major clients in the US. And the next show will tell you all about their clients. So if you are interested in learning more about them, just get a hold of me, caliendo19@gmail.com. We will be giving you their website and everything here in the next couple shows. So again, thank you so much to SIS Solutions Integrated Services. We really appreciate that. Hey, guess what? We have an outstanding guest. And let me tell you, not only a great guest, great person, an Italian American, and a guy that's been in the game a long time. He looks like he's about 18 years old, but he's been in the game a long time. And God bless his youth. We met in Slovenia at the WBSC European Baseball Congress. I think we hit it off. We had a great time there, talked baseball. I learned a lot just from the short period I was there with him. Just a brilliant mind in the game. He scouted amateur baseball and also internationally. Get this, he's a former assistant general manager, not only for the Diamondbacks, the Nationals. By the way, Mike Rizzo, Chicago guy, great guy, worked with his dad a long time here in independent ball, and the Phillies, assistant GM. In those capacities, handled baseball operations, rules compliance, transactions, budgeting, and contract negotiations. He was also director of baseball ops for the Pittsburgh Pirates for 9 years. Hey, his degree, bachelor's in science, double major in math and stats at the University of Pittsburgh. Now get this, and we're going to talk about this eventually, but I want to get into the baseball part first. He's running for the president of the WBSC, the World Baseball Softball Confederation. He's also up for executive board member at large, chairman, baseball division, and vice chairman of the baseball division. So he's got great talent. If he makes one of these with the WBSC, he is going to be a huge part of the WBSC. He's going to be so integral because he has so much experience and he loves international baseball. So let's not waste any time. Let's welcome my friend, Bryan Minniti. How you doing, Bryan?
I'm great, Pete. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. Sorry for that long talk, but we had a little intro there. Got a great sponsor coming on board. And I thought it was important, to mention your background a little bit. And I know it goes back, you've done a lot more than that, but also, the thing that, you will be up for election in July with the WBSC, which we'll get into. But hopefully everything's going well for you, my friend.
Everything's great. Thank you. And you characterized our meeting in Slovenia well. We did hit it off. So it was great. And I would say I learned so much by being there, not just from you, but everyone I got to meet. The whole experience was wild and really interesting to me.
Yeah, and what a great people, international people, aren't they? International baseball. They love the game. They're in it for the love of the game. They're not just in it for a job, even though, if they can get a job, God bless them, right? Because if you can get a job in something you love and develop baseball in your country, why not?
No question. Yeah, I think a lot of your listeners are in the same boat as me and you. Just lucky to be a part of this thing.
And Bryan, you're starting to see, before I start with the quick question and answer, I want to let the audience know about you. The other part of all this is you're starting to actually see countries, you see people in other countries who are getting jobs in baseball because they're being creative, whether it's, coaching development, whether it's just baseball development, whether it's teams, all the different things, they're starting to get jobs, which it's nice to see.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah. And I think everybody, the more time you spend outside of your own country, you realize there are a lot of people that are, often enthusiastic like you. And I've really learned a lot in this space about how creative some folks have to be in their country, whether it's a lack of equipment or infrastructure, or anything like that. And those are the kind of people you like to hire and have on staff that can make an impact with your players and your kids.
Absolutely. And folks, the other thing we want to accomplish here is, I want Bryan, I'm going to talk to Bryan about how he got started in baseball, because, there's a lot of young people getting into the game, and there's different levels, and, what do you have to do to get to there? What kind of background you need? I mean, you notice Bryan's background, he'll tell you more about it, but, bachelor in science, a double major in math and statistics, and a baseball background, but we'll get into that. Bryan, let's do this real quick, because I think it'd be great for our audience to kind of know you a little bit. Where'd you grow up?
Sure. All over the country, a lot of Pennsylvania. My family's mostly from Pennsylvania, but I grew up all over the place. California, Georgia, Ohio. I was born outside of Cleveland, and a lot of Pennsylvania, though, growing up.
What's all the moving?
My dad's job. He was in the power industry, nuclear and fossil fuels at different points. So we were all over the country for that.
There go. Now I know where you got your smarts from. I got it now. Nuclear development here. All right. And what kind of sports did you play?
I played, just like everybody else, I guess. Growing up, you play everything. I played, football and baseball my whole life. I was not very good at, I wasn't very good at any of them, quite honestly. But I played basketball, hockey, golf. Like you do as a kid, you play a little bit of everything. But through high school, football and baseball.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I played baseball, not very good at all, and I know that for sure. That's the fact. High school you attended?
York Catholic High School in York, Pennsylvania, just south of Harrisburg, a little north of Baltimore.
And college was just University of Pittsburgh, right?
University of Pittsburgh, yeah, that was it. And then I was lucky enough to get started with the Pirates my junior year of college.
Wow, and we're going to talk about that. What about when you were a young kid? What my mom knew that I wanted to be a scientist. No way I was ever going to be one. But because I didn't like school and just did average. Sure. What did you want to be when you were young?
Yeah, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I actually thought I wanted to be a pediatrician, which, I guess on some level ultimately ties into the WBSC stuff in terms of my interest in helping kids. But yeah, I thought that was going to be my career. I actually, the University of Pittsburgh was the only college I applied to that wasn't for baseball. Everywhere else was to play baseball. And, I was probably a scout ahead of my years there in terms of knowing that I wasn't very good. And so I thought I'm going to go to school and be a doctor. And I would say, Chem 2 and Bio 2 took care of that for me pretty quickly. So I was able to switch my major and switch gears, and really lucky to have landed in baseball when I did.
Awesome. And folks, I'm looking down in case you're on Facebook or YouTube. I look down because I'm looking at the Facebook page. My mom and dad taught me great manners. Always when you're talking to somebody, you make sure you look them in the eyes. But once in a while, I got to look down because I'm hoping to get some questions for Bryan. Because, man, with your background especially. Hey, how about brothers and sisters?
I have one younger brother who lives in suburban Michigan. So yeah, that's it.
Anybody else in baseball?
No, nobody else. I've just, some ties to growing up. Somebody who's been a good friend since I've known him since I was 12 as a GM of the Reds. But outside of that, no, nobody I knew in baseball. And certainly I was lucky to get in because I didn't know anybody at that point either.
And being with all these teams, I'm sure you got people calling you for tickets, right?
Yeah. Which is actually it's a fun thing. That's one of the benefits of, especially when you're traveling with the major league team, which I've done a lot of at different points. It's actually a nice opportunity to visit with friends and family all over the country on someone else's dime, except for when the tax bill comes for the tickets.
Yeah, that's changed a little bit because now you got to pay taxes on the tickets. And I remember in the old days, you could just give them away, but now there's taxes that you have to pay.
So, you have to really like who you leave them for.
Yeah, exactly. No wonder I didn't get any tickets yet. Oh, geez, no, I'm just kidding. Kidding, folks. Never ask for tickets. The other part is, how about when you were a kid? The Boston Red Sox were my favorite team. I don't know why, but I remember the '75 World Series between the Reds and Boston, and I actually taped it on the cassette tapes. I still have that. I'm not sure many people have that show or that World Series on cassette. Great World Series. That was my favorite team. What do you got when you were a kid?
I lived in or near a handful of major league cities. So I didn't really have a favorite team. I would say that I kind of followed wherever I lived. But I really think a lot of my interest in baseball and my passion for it was I spent a few years living in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. My parents are actually both from there. And so I grew up going to the Little League World Series as a kid, but also going to minor league baseball games there in Williamsport. And for a long time, when I was younger, they were a double A team for the Indians, the Mariners, the Mets, now the Guardians, of course. But yeah, so I grew up going to double A baseball games, my whole life. My grandfather was a season ticket holder and all like that. So I think that's really if I had an early rooting interest, it was the Williamsport Bills at the time for a long
Yeah.
time and all like that. But then living in a bunch of, in or near a bunch of major league cities, I kind of just, loved baseball, and I loved whoever was watching.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Matter of fact, you mentioned Little League. All our friends right now from Europe and Africa in Little League right now for their European and African meetings. We see them all on Facebook. Everybody we've seen in Slovenia there, they're having a good time. Good to see them get a chance, travel into the U.S., go to the Little League World Series site, be on the field. I think there was some umpire things going on. Pretty cool.
Very cool, yeah.
All right, man. Listen, last one. You probably had several, but I know I've had probably 4 or 5 mentors, but man, you can mention a couple mentors that really helped you along the way, especially that you want to thank, because they, without them, I know without certain mentors I would never have done what I'm doing right now.
Sure. Yeah, I that's way too long of a list, and I'm way more inclined to leave somebody off that's important to me than not. But I'll just say a couple things. I mean, I've worked for, I want to say 7 different general managers over my career, and I've learned a lot from every single one of them. And I've been really lucky because they were all wildly different people, which was really cool. And then, I wouldn't be in baseball if it weren't for John Mercurio. John is a professional scout with the Phillies. John hired me as an intern with the Pittsburgh Pirates, back in the winter of 2000, going into 2001. And, I wouldn't have a career in baseball if he hadn't hired me, and then, fought hard to keep me, even when I was in college. So I'll leave it at that. But I mean, just countless people that I've been exposed to, front office, scouting, old school, new school, you name it. I've been really, really lucky in my career to have been raised by, a lot of people that had a lot of interest in helping me learn and grow. And I couldn't do it any justice by trying to name a few people.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would have put you a little bit on a spot, especially if you got a lot of people like that. Here's the interesting part. I want to get started with how you got started into the game. And what's interesting about this is, here we are at University of Pittsburgh. I know I was in school, never really knew what I was going to take degree-wise. I was a pre-law major, just because I like law. And I didn't know till my 3rd year really what I really want to do. And I'm not even sure even knew after I graduated what I wanted to do. Right. My mom always asked me, hey, what are you going to go into? Doctor, attorney, this, that. I said baseball. I think she almost flipped when I said baseball. But here you are. I believe you said a junior year. You're doing work with the Pirates. Where did this all start? How did you decide, what you're going to do? And because you obviously took these classes specifically for baseball, the statistics aspect?
No. So when I shifted gears, my major, I switched to math because it just made sense to me. I had continued to take math classes, and it just made sense to me. And the statistics degree was something I was able to do at the same time. I'm not sure I would do that again if I had the chance to do it over again. It was probably a little out of my reach, but I made it through. And really, I love baseball, but I didn't know you could work in baseball. I'll try and make this fairly brief, but
no, go.
I had a couple of moments that really stand out. So one is a guy I mentioned before, Nick Kroll, is the general manager of the Reds. Like I said, I've known Nick since I was 12. Nick was an American Legion coach in the summertime, and he was a few years older than me, and came back and coached my team one summer. And he got an internship in the minor leagues with the now defunct New Jersey Cardinals, who are I think now the State College Spikes, so anyways, so Nick getting into minor league baseball was a motivator for me, because I thought, wow, here's this opportunity to go do something I love and work in an industry I love, or I should say a sport I love. I didn't know about really anything about it at the time. So I would say he was my big motivator, and throughout our careers, we've always been close. And then once I kind of accidentally stumbled into an internship with the Pirates. I had gone to an internship office at the University of Pittsburgh and kind of naively told them that I really liked sports and I wanted to work in sports. And, I think probably, I don't know how, young your listeners are, but you have to keep in mind that, this is 22 years ago at this point. And, the the level of sophistication and the savvy with getting into these things is far different than it was then. So, or is now, I should say. So I was lucky enough. I looked into some internships in hockey even, and a woman told me that there was the Pirates were looking for somebody that sounded like me, and I faxed a resume over, interviewed a week later, and I've been doing this ever since. And I would say that a few months after that, we had our scouting meetings in January of 2001, I believe it was. Our whole scouting staff was together, and they're rolling out a new scouting software. And Cam Bonifay at the time was the general manager, and I got to stand in the back of the room and listen to him speak and address the scouting staff. And I will, try not to get emotional, but I'll never forget how that felt to stand there and listen to him talk with these guys, and just the professionalism, the way he carried himself, his message, everything about it. And I remember that moment going, holy cow, I want to be that guy. And that's kind of how it went from there. And I was lucky enough to kind of give up my friends and family to keep having a job there and stay as long as I did.
And I remember Cam, I don't know him, but man, that is inspiring, because, when you hear guys like that really gives you an opening into saying, hey, that's something I really want to do. And the gals on Facebook, I appreciate the comments. Keep bringing the comments. Got a great one from our friend Syed, from Pakistan.
Sure.
The president, Bryan, he says Bryan can make a good role in development of baseball, specifically in developing countries like Pakistan, India, Nepal, Iran, Iraq, Palestine, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, African countries, also European development countries in the game. And I agree with you, Syed, 100%. He is outstanding. And no matter what, he's going to be doing a lot of things internationally, but I'm hoping that one of them will be with the WBSC. And we're going to talk about that towards the end of the show here, how he got into that and what his goals are. The other part of this, Bryan, is you've got nowadays, I'm a young person, I want to get into a game. It sounds like, hey, get into statistics, get into mathematics. It's something you almost have to do to give you either to stay on par or to put yourself ahead of somebody else. Of course, you got to know the development of the game too, baseball itself. I mean, you can learn that obviously through internships and all that. But what's your advice there to young people?
Yeah, I guess I would say it never hurts to know as much as you can know about pretty much everything that applies to the game these days. I would say, generally speaking, broadly, and I don't know if this is different for any other industry that's unique, find ways to separate yourself from the pack. And maybe that's a language skill. Maybe that's an applied experience. Maybe it's just getting creative with the experiences you have and making them appeal to people that are in the industry you want to be in, and make it sound similar. But I think, generally speaking, the things you're talking about, analytics and numbers and things like that, they're not going to go away. So I think anything you do to learn and grow in that area is going to help you. But the more well-rounded you are, the better. And really, I think it comes down to just, separators on your resume or in your background that give you an opportunity to put yourself in a lot of different rooms. And again, I don't know if that's unique to baseball, but I would say that, working for professional baseball teams, you realize that, pretty quickly that's a wide range of people that you're trying to reach and work with and get the best out of. And so the more opportunities you give yourself, the more skills you give yourself to reach those different types of people, the better.
I'm glad you kept talking, because I had a little difficulty here, but we're good. We're back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep, we're good.
All right, good. And that you did your internship, and that reminds me, a lot of people, men and women, trying to get internships. That's another thing, right? How do you get an internship and get the teams to accept you? Now, you did it with a major league club, but you could do it with minor league clubs, independent clubs. What's the separator there? The same thing. I mean, you got to do something. I know there's resumes and all this other stuff, but how do you get picked? Because there's a lot of people want to do these, baseball jobs.
I couldn't get hired today. I just couldn't. My resume just was not good enough. I really was right place, right time, particularly for not knowing anybody and the background I had at that point. I really, really got lucky, and I couldn't do it again without a sponsor or anything like that. So my story is unique in its own, and my story is, and my career is really tied to probably just work ethic and desire to learn and grow. But I got an opportunity kind of on accident, and I don't know that you can really do much about that these days. It's really hard. It's really competitive. It's never been more competitive, arguably. So I guess the thing I would encourage people to do is reach out to as many people as you can. And again, probably not unique to baseball, but reach out to as many people as you can to learn about their story, because I don't think anybody has a linear path in baseball and in terms of how they got where they are. I think everybody has a slightly different story, some twist on it. Minor league internships or independent league internships don't necessarily correlate to major league ones, but I think that just my opinion, I don't know how many people share this opinion, but my opinion is if someone went and worked in the minor leagues or went and worked for an independent league team, they have a work ethic and a, care factor that I think is a separator, in my opinion, because that's hard work. You do a lot of different things. It's not glorious. You often don't get paid much at all. So it's really about your own growth and how you can make the best of that. So I admire people who do that. I got really lucky that I didn't have to. And frankly, I was kind of naive to not have to do that. But I think that there's no linear path. There's no one way. And the more people you meet in, probably again, any profession, but definitely in baseball, the more you realize that there are a lot of different ways to get where you want to go.
Yeah. What's cool nowadays, on a flip side, what's different is that, they're hiring a lot more women, men, ethnic groups. It doesn't matter. At one time it was pretty much, cycled to men and in the game of baseball. Now it's open, even though it's more competitive, you also have more opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great thing. I mean, I think, look, things get stagnant when you have too many of the same people around.
Yep.
And there's still an argument to be made for that in a lot of industries, but in baseball. So, I'm very proud of the fact that I've always, made an effort as someone who's hired a lot of people for their first jobs. Try really hard to diversify, opinions, backgrounds, and give yourself a chance to have some people that can bring some fresh perspectives.
Well, here, interesting. All right, here we go. Assistant GM, 3 different clubs, all these responsibilities. You got to hire somebody in the in whatever capacity, and you got all these resumes, and they're all pretty good. And what's the separator that you're looking for, or that impresses you? What are you looking for when you hire somebody?
Man, that's a very difficult question to ask without a specific job in mind. I think
I'm going to give you one at the end, but I want to see if kind of, and I know it's going to be specific for, it could be baseball ops, it could be,
Sure.
Budgeting, whatever it may be. But let's put it this way. Let me rephrase it. Let's go with, forget the job title, the person. What are you looking for?
Yeah, work ethic. I would say communication ability, skills to be the ability to reach different types of people, and a curiosity, an intellectual curiosity, I think goes a long ways. I think if you're willing to work, willing to put in the time and have an appreciation for different types of people that you're going to come across, I think it's going to separate you from a lot of people.
Is there something unique in interviews that maybe you've had with people that said, bingo, I like this person? I mean, is there something that grabbed you at times?
That's an excellent question. I've never been asked that. Yeah, I don't know. I that's a really good question. I think I like to think I have pretty good instincts for people. So I think that there's just something, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm Joe Super Scout when it comes to scouting baseball ability. I can hold my own, I think, but when it comes to reading people and hiring, I think I've done pretty well in my career at hiring a lot of good people. You never bat 1,000, but I feel like I have pretty good instincts for that. And so I think you can find out about kind of their background and how they work and the type of person they are, how communicative they are. I think you can learn those things in a room, and you get a feeling sometimes, or a vibe. But that's a great question. I can't say one specific thing. I'm sorry. That's a good question.
Yeah. And sometimes there may not be a specific thing. Sometimes it could be, like I've had some young people that, that I don't know, we're at tryouts or we're workouts, and and then just the way they talk to you,
Sure.
You could tell if either they're kind of trying to, we use the word brown nose,
Sure.
or if they're just genuine and man, they're really sharp with their questions.
Yeah.
They may ask you some questions. You go, wow, this kid's pretty sharp, and I could learn from that person also.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you get that feeling. Like you said, you read it and you read the conversation, you get that feeling.
All right. So Bryan, all of a sudden now he's doing his internship. How does the rest lead into starting the career?
Yeah, I think just sacrificing everything else in my life. It's probably not a popular answer, but I didn't go to class a whole lot once I got an internship with the Pirates, and I think my GPA reflects that. But I was lucky enough to just have an opportunity to be at the park all the time, and I think that's probably how I separated myself, especially when we had a leadership change ultimately when Ken Bonifay was let go and Dave Littlefield came in as the GM. was just there. I was there all the time. And I think that, for better or worse, was my separator. I also, an easy thing to say is, I had support and stuff like that. I didn't, have money from other people or anything like that. I had to work a couple of other part-time jobs, second, third shift, weekends, that type of stuff to make, be able to pay my bills and survive, which I think gave me an appreciation for a lot of things in life. But really I was just trying to be there as often as I could and just always be there when someone needed something, wanted something, being willing to do whatever. And I really was just lucky enough to keep going with that. And ultimately that grew into a lot of, different responsibilities. I was, again, countless list of people that gave me access to, things that I got exposed to that I was able to learn from and grow with over time.
I'm glad you used the word sacrifice, and I'll tell you why. I think sometimes, and everybody's got to sacrifice a little bit. Obviously, if you don't have to sacrifice, okay, great. You found the job, all of a sudden somebody liked you, they hired you, that's fantastic. But you use the word sacrifice. And the reason I bring it up is because even in my industry, a lot of times, and I'm not trying to stereotype young people in general, so it's not a general comment, but I do run into quite a bit of young people who want things fast nowadays. It's like, what can you do for me? It's no longer what can you do for me, because I'm the one that's hiring, right? I mean,
Sure.
Advice, just advice. That's all I'm asking for. Advice for young people what does sacrifice mean? Is that salary, whatever it may be? What do you think?
I wish it wasn't salary. I think it often is, how many of us are really paid like we think we should be in life?
Right.
Which, it kind of stinks, but that's where we are. But yeah, it's a good observation. I think probably that's a struggle for me as someone who's managed a lot of people over time. It is, how do you thread that needle of giving people a voice or maybe a place at the table or respect that maybe you didn't have early in your career, and giving it to them and kind of helping them grow and learn faster, recognizing that they may have a great opinion, they may have a great idea that might be the best one you hear in a while, and just because they're junior doesn't mean they can't have that or don't have that, and balancing that with the I guess learning how to do business and respect and kind of earning that place at the table too. And so that's a really tricky thing. My advice would be as patient as you can, listen and learn, and find the right spots to express your opinions, the right people to express them to, the right rooms to express them in. But it's, there's a bit of feel and nuance to that as well. That's a little bit of a tricky thing to answer. And I understand exactly what you're saying. And it's something that I've always struggled with, as I've been managing people for a while, is kind of that push and pull of making sure you want these people to get paid better than you did and have more access than you did. And then balancing the kind of the other side of that.
Excellent. And I can only say from my experience when I was younger, the other part, I definitely sacrificed like you did financially and everything, because you have a love for what you're doing. If you can sacrifice and wait a little bit, good things will happen. I most of the time. And I remember just an opportunity came up, and I didn't go for the job. I said I will run the thing and raise my own salary. I wanted it that bad. I said, I'll figure out how to raise the money. Don't worry about it. And they gave it to me, right? Because why wouldn't they give you something if you say, I'll do it for free?
Sure.
Well, just let me raise the money, right? I'll raise my own salary. Isn't that great? So if you get that opportunity, hey, sometimes when you're young, you can take those chances because, you don't have the family, the kids, and
Sure.
a lot of bills and all that. So I think that's maybe some advice there. The other part is, and I'm going to get to some questions here because we got some questions coming up on a WBSC. I want to get to that, but I think it's an interesting process here. The other part of all this is, I think young people have to understand too, is it's competitive once you're inside too. It's kind of like a baseball team. You want to be a team, but you're also trying to maybe get to a different level, right? Maybe your goal is to be assistant GM or director of scouting. I mean, you can't really everybody has ambitions, right? That's fair enough. So how do you keep humble and level when you're trying also to get to the next level?
Sure. Well, so let me go back to the compensation thing. I mean, that's a really, really tricky thing, especially these days as college is getting more and more expensive and all like that. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. I got really lucky to live in an inexpensive city. And, I was able to get a couple of part-time jobs that allowed me to kind of float myself and get through the tough times. But that's not always the case for people. And that's a really tricky thing. And I know that's a particularly tricky topic as it gets to hiring. But it's a good question. I think that I don't know. Rephrase the question one more time. Just
basically, you're going to compete with people
sure,
in the
yeah,
industry, right?
sure. So I think
And you don't want, and you don't want, I don't think people like people that cutthroat other people. That's
no.
not
Yeah,
a good thing, right?
yeah, I think it's like anything else, being a good teammate and being respectful and trying to make the greater good better. It's easy for me to say. That's just how I'm wired. Not everyone is, but I think when you have people that aren't good teammates, just like any other team, they tend to get weeded out pretty quickly. And I guess whether it's sales, marketing, baseball, whatever, there's a sliding scale of tolerance and performance. So, maybe you deal with a little more crap from someone if they're really good, but generally speaking, I think it is competitive, but I think you look for people that can work well with the team and try and elevate the masses and do everything you can to kind of bring the group up as best you can. But that's, I think, if I will sound like a crotchety old man, something that's going on in baseball right now is I think there's a lot of people trying to be right and trying to make their mark instead of worrying about, the greater good of the game or what individual player needs to get better. So that's the last thing I'll say on that. But I think generally speaking, you look for people that are going to be good teammates, and in general, you want people who can shine by, their efforts and their own volition, not tearing other people down to get there. And so I would say, looking for people that are smart, creative, aggressive, trying to take on more work and do it respectfully and humbly. And to your point about staying humble, I think in baseball it's not hard unless you're completely unaware, particularly in scouting. How many times you hear, if you haven't made mistakes, you haven't done it long enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't, even coaching, I've never seen a coach intentionally mess a player up. He did something. He gave a drill to a player that has worked for him before, and maybe it didn't work with that guy. Now the guy's in a bad spot or whatever. It wasn't intentional. So I think all of us, if you haven't made mistakes, you're probably not trying, and you also haven't been doing it very long. And so I think that stuff will humble you pretty quickly.
Bryan, you then became director of baseball operations for the Pirates. Did that lead right into that? How did that look?
Yeah, a few years of kind of doing a little bit of everything, moving a lot of cars, making a lot of copies, and just being able to sit in a room and then taking over things slowly, as I went. And when Neil Huntington came in as the GM at the end of 2007, he made me the director of baseball operations, and I was there for 2 years with him before I went to Washington as assistant GM. And so I got to work with Neil for a couple of years and a couple other guys that was really sharp.
How does that look as director of baseball ops? What's the responsibilities overall?
Yeah, so really not dissimilar. We didn't have an assistant GM title at the time, and so I in a lot of ways I functioned as that for him. I was handling a good chunk of our major league and minor league contract negotiations, rule compliance, salary arbitration, that type of stuff. Working with some people on that. So anything we did, I was right in the middle of it, whether it was trades, waivers, whatever. And that was really similar, even though I had a different title, similar to a couple of my assistant GM stops as well, where, or at least one of them anyways, in Arizona, where it was more major league focused. Now in Pittsburgh, that was my first foray into really kind of overseeing international scouting. I worked hand in hand with our guy who was doing Latin America, but I got to oversee kind of the rest of the world. And was involved in some pretty interesting opportunities there or signings there. So that was my first real foray into that. It's something that I have been interested in, and we really hadn't done much of outside of Latin America, and started to grow it those couple of years. So I'd say that was probably the biggest distinction at that point.
Wow, that young, that many responsibilities, starting to grow the game a little bit worldwide when it comes to players and all that. Take us into, this is a good friend of mine is Ken Medlock, who was in Moneyball. He played Grady Fusion in Moneyball in the meeting. He's the guy that got fired. And take us into one of those meetings, that, remember you saw the meeting in Moneyball, talking about players. Is that kind of like a meeting goes, or is that for Hollywood?
I think when that was set, that was in a lot of ways, it was how some of those conversations went
at that time, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe not quite that unsophisticated. I think that was played up a little bit for the movies, of course.
Sure.
There's certainly a lot more scouting data and things like that available.
And I asked that because you mentioned earlier, I think you said something, I don't know how you phrased it, but say things at the right time, in other words, you're in a room with a bunch of scouts, because some of those guys were scouts, actual scouts in the movie.
Sure.
And you're in that meeting, you got a GM, you've got all these powerful people, and you might be, maybe just got the job, right? Just came in. And, you know, you got to be careful what you say, or you have to know how to say it, or maybe you just need to say it sometimes.
Yeah, I erred on keeping my mouth shut. And maybe that's how I
Yeah.
lasted as long as I did. But I was way more likely to not say a word and then
Yeah.
go to someone I trusted later and ask a question about. And really,
Mm.
that's how I learned a lot of things in my career. I mean, just that's how I learned even where I am today. But you know, in general, when I was first coming up, that was a lot of the stuff I did. I was lucky enough to get to sit outside of the general manager's office. And you know, the downside was I had to answer his phone and move his car. The upside was, you know, late at night when the game's over and I could sit and ask him questions about transactions and thought process and things like that. So those types of things, those types of scenarios, it's just knowing the right time and place. And, you know, I'm not going to ask a challenging question or some question that might, you know, challenge someone's authority in front of their whole staff, or,
Mm-hmm.
you know, say something kind of flippant or, you know, that I'm not sure of in a room like that. But I have a relationship with the scouting director and I can say, hey, at the time, you know, Ed Creech, hey, Ed Creech, you know, I thought about this, or what about this? And he would take the time to answer me and explain it to me, or one of the cross checkers or something like that, or a pro scout or whatever the meeting was. So you're just finding the right place and time. And I think that kind of is twofold. It's one, it's showing you're paying attention to somebody, taking an interest in, and also having the respect to ask them their opinion and kind of their experience on it and the rationale. But on top of that, not making a fool of yourself in front of a lot of people too. So it's kind of a nice combination of those things. So I would say, generally speaking, I would err my own experience. I would err on the side of caution with that.
You know what? I'm with you because I can think of many times. I grew up with older coaches, older everybody, scouts, you name them. So I'm with you because I could never say much. I'd always have to ask afterwards, what'd you think about this? Or what? So I'm with you 100%. A question for you: when you're going from, you know, director of baseball ops, and we're going to talk about your assistant GM role too. Now, who does the negotiations for you when you get a job? Is it an agent or is it you individually or?
No, me individually, yeah. Which actually I think is a great experience. Just, you know, learning how to advocate for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and also, you know, having some points of reference as best you can at different stages. But yeah, I've always handled that myself.
Do GMs have agents? Because they get paid pretty good.
There are some that use agents to maybe review a contract for them or bounce ideas off of.
Attorney, yeah.
Yeah, but not, I would say not in the traditional sense.
Okay. You know, and the other part of all this, man, you worked with some incredible people, and you were, you know, I know you couldn't mention all your mentors, but here we are. We're talking about Dave Littlefield, Neil Hullington, you know, Mike Rizzo. I'm not sure who the Phillies GM was, but when you look at, and you can mention them, when you look at all these GMs in their positions, I mean, I look at a guy like Mike Rizzo, you know, scout, understands development, understands the game, but yet is open to all the analytics of the game. I can't even pronounce this, let alone try to learn it. What makes these GMs, when they get to that level, what makes them good? What's the quality of a GM?
Yeah, it's a good question. So some of the others, you know, I worked with Tony La Russa and Dave Stewart in Arizona,
Oh
Matt
yeah.
Klentak in Philadelphia. So all of them are different. You know, they're all very, very different, and their backgrounds are different, and their thought processes are different. They're, you know, I've always looked at my job as an assistant to that person, as trying to fill in the gaps for them. You know, where are they soft? Where can't they be? I need to be in those places. I need to handle these responsibilities. So it's just varied with each person I've worked for. You know, if I had to single a couple of those guys out, you know, I learned so much about just being a general manager, watching Dave Littlefield for 6+ years, day in, day out, and the approach he took to the job, which was very, probably even to his own detriment, very selfless and very, he was constantly trying to do something to better the group and better the team, and that, you know, took a lot out of him, and it took a lot of time and effort and energy, and he was great at it in those regards. But I think generally speaking, you know, I could say Neil Huntington, Mike Rizzo, kind of as the next two guys I worked for. You know, not being afraid to fail and not being afraid to do it how you believe you need to do it, and being willing to, you know, ultimately sacrifice your job for trying to do things the way you believe in it. And it's such a rare opportunity to get to be a general manager, to have that opportunity. I don't want to speak for these guys, but this is my observation for all three of those guys, and then guys I worked for after. But having the opportunity to do that job, and it's so difficult and so wide ranging. You know, not sacrificing your beliefs or what got you to that point, and trying to do the best you can. It's a really difficult job. It's a thankless job in a lot of ways. And, I admire guys who've gone about it in that way where they've not sacrificed what they believe in. They've tried to do it their way, try to do it right and see how it goes. And you have some, flashes of success. And generally speaking, this whole thing it's a pretty difficult operation to run. So I have a lot of admiration and respect for anybody who's done that, really for any sport. But I know for baseball, it's a tricky thing. So that's probably something I learned.
Well, I know they get, obviously make very good money nowadays. I remember Roland Heeman telling me that, he used to help pull a tarp when he was GM, they don't do that anymore.
No.
But they have major responsibilities. Not only is it on their shoulders to put together a well-run organization, and we're not talking about baseball wise only, we're talking about business wise too. They got to handle both sides of this. And I know they got to hire good people, winning is part of it. There's a lot of pressure. There's people that, maybe even want their jobs, right? I mean, it's again, competitive. That's life. So you got to trust people. That's not easy. When you saw these guys operate, how were they with their employees? What made them special with their employees?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say trust and allowing people to do their jobs and belief in the people that they hire or that they inherit to work and do their jobs. Realizing that you can't do that job by yourself and being comfortable delegating and letting people work around you. That's always a tricky thing, managing people and learning how to delegate and being comfortable with it. I think it takes a lot of time to be comfortable with it and good at it, to believe that, especially when the stakes are high in that regard, your job and hundreds of other people's jobs are dependent on good decisions and, trusting that people are going to do things the way you want them done, on the manner, the conversations are going to happen the way you want them to happen. It's hard. So I think trusting people and letting them do their jobs is probably the most compelling thing. But it's a tricky thing.
Sure. And I'm going to jump back for a second because this Moneyball keeps coming in my mind, right? Every time we talk about GMs and assistant GMs. And again, this was a player's point of view, or when they fired a player, remember they had the assistant do it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to ever do that? And how do you handle that situation, whether it be an employee, player, whatever it is?
Yeah. So I've had to fire many people, some by choice, some not. I COVID and everything like that. I've had to release plenty of players. Generally speaking, I think just having difficult conversations in management is always a challenge. So I think I think I've learned a lot in terms of how to do that. I think it's a skill because not everyone's comfortable having conversations like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a skill I think I bring to the table, regardless of what I do. And I don't know if that's something you want to be proud of, but it's what it is. I think you just try and be as humane as possible, direct as possible, and short as possible to get to the point and move forward. Somebody a long time ago, I worked with the farm director I worked with, said something I'll never forget. So, when you release a player, he always took cut days very, very hard. Release days in the minor leagues very hard. And he said, when you release a player, you're not just releasing him, you're releasing his, wife or girlfriend, his parents, his hometown, his high school coach, his college coach, all of his buddies growing up. And that's maybe that's a little dramatic. And if you think of it that way, you put yourself in a slump. But I think what it points to is just being respectful that, you're impacting someone's life. And some of these guys, some of the players understand that they have, a limited amount of time to kind of show their wares and progress. Some people, never really understand that and all like that. So I think it's something you're just trying to be careful with. I would say that when I was really lucky, I felt like being able to oversee scouting and player development for the Phillies, I could be on both sides of that narrative and with our scouting staff, with our player development staff. And so it was important to me that, we made sure when we signed a player, he was going to get an opportunity to play. It wasn't going to be, I didn't want two things you always hear from players. This is a little bit of a tangent here, but two things you always hear from players are, I wish they had been honest with me and I didn't get a chance. And, those two things were things you can control, I think. So I tried really hard, barring injury and things like that. I tried to make sure we were as direct with players as we could be as proactive with conversations, especially tough ones, assignments, opportunities, those types of things, be as direct as we could be. And then also make sure that if we signed a player, he got an opportunity to play, he got innings, he got at bats. And that's not always that easy. Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, but I at the end of the day, when you release a player and you send them home, if that's it for them, my goal was to have them at least understand that they got a chance and they were treated with respect. And, again, you don't bat 1,000. Sometimes things happen, but that to me was the goal. And I think it's no different with an employee.
And that's a, good point, because, you talk about listening skills. I think those are so important, and you listen to them. You listen to those 2 great points and use that for when you had to either release a player or a person. And honesty is the best policy, even though it's the hardest part, right? Because you don't want to make them feel bad, but at the same time, they're going to feel bad no matter what. And they're going to be angry at the beginning, right? I think they'll learn later. Hey, Bryan was right. Okay. Just like having your own son or daughter, they learn later that mom and dad were correct in that area. So as long as you're honest, I think, because sometimes I've seen in the game, because I've been involved independently and seen some managers not really tell that player when they release them why they released them. I just think it's better off. I agree with you. Just be honest, and I think that's the best policy. All right, play a little game here. The game's changing. You're now general manager of a major league club. I know this could be a whole show in itself, but I don't know if things have changed in this perspective, but in the past, it's always been, pitching, defense, and then maybe hopefully hitting. You'll work on it, but you're putting a team together. Everything involved, skills or anything else. What are the most important things to you when you're putting this club together?
It's pretty far afield. So I think you got to look at what you have currently, and how long are you committed to some of those players. Philosophically, what's available on the market, whether it's by trade or by free agency, and be realistic about kind of where you are and where you need to go. I think, look, the simple answer is pitching and defense, of course, and, situational hitting and guys that hit for power. I mean, we all want really good players. I think you realize pretty quickly there aren't 30 superstars at every position, and you end up making sacrifices in certain places, whether it's hit for power, power for hit, defense, over hit, whatever. And, no team is going to be perfect. And, when you have a lot of money, you can try and be perfect. You have more room to try and be perfect or take chances. I learned that working for small and big market teams that, small market teams, the biggest difference is margin for error. If you give a lot of money to a player and he stinks, he's yours, and you got to figure it out, or you're going to be hampered by that. So, I think just trying to make good decisions and feed off of what you have, in the minor leagues. What do you have coming up for free agency? Where's our team? How are we constructed? What's our ballpark like? All those types of things.
I asked you that question because I knew you could answer it right away. Yeah, I know. You said it's a whole show in itself, but but we're not going to finish here. We're going to continue, because I'm going to ask you. Okay, you're in the draft, and you've got certain, and I read things in the papers, with GMs and all this, and I hear what they're looking for. But you got a draft going on. It's not just the skills that you're looking at, is it?
No, particularly early in the draft. I mean, you've got to factor in, makeup and risk and things like that. And that varies. Where are you picking? And, do you have all of your picks? Are you missing a second or third round pick? Do you have compensation picks? So you can kind of take some chances at different places based on that stuff. But, and there are points in the draft or even after the draft where you just sign raw ability and take a chance on your development staff to make the guy better. I think it just varies.
Are there things about the person? How much research is done on the individual, the family, and so forth?
Yeah, as much as you can. Whether it's just meeting them, social media, relying on your area scout to have as much of a relationship as possible, or as much information as possible. Whether it's what the parents look like physically, especially if you're dealing with younger kids in maybe Latin America or something. What do the parents look like? What do their family members look like? What type of family is it? Single parent, multiple parents, a lot of brothers and sisters, none. What's their playing background? How do their coaches like them? You rely a lot on your area scouts to get a lot of that information. When it trickles up, it's going to be more, red flags and things like that you try and pay attention to, and assume that you're going to, when it comes to a conversation about a first rounder, that, if there are a lot of red flags there, you probably have already weeded that person out. But I think it's like any other business. You don't know about people sometimes until you hire them. And there's things you can't account for, injuries, how they respond to failure and challenges. You just don't know that sometimes until you get someone either on your staff or as a player.
You mentioned red flags. Give me a couple.
Arrest record, or, how they, see them, how they treat people around them. I don't know. There's a zillion things you could probably reference there.
But those are good points. I mean, character's big.
Sure.
I mean, if you got bad character, I'm not sure that's somebody you really want on your club, on your team, and even in your office, right? I mean, character, how they get along with people. Now, has there ever been a time where as a club, you had to make a decision, um, especially in the first round, where character or something else just didn't match and you went to the next person? You don't have to name names or anything, just in general.
I definitely wouldn't name names. That'd be tricky. So no, I think always, and kind of what I referenced earlier, a sliding scale of tolerance and performance. If they're going to be a pain in the butt or not a good guy, they better be really good. And I mean, really good. And that rope probably burns a little faster. For some people, I mean, we've all known, really talented people that couldn't sustain it because they didn't have something. So sure, of course. And scouting is really hard in general. Player development is really hard in general. So, you're more likely to make mistakes than not. And you try and limit those mistakes or learn from them and grow. So certainly, you try and take, especially early in the draft when you're committing a lot of money, you're trying to make the most balanced decision you can. So, you're more likely to take a chance on a guy who's maybe got, less character later when the dollars aren't the same risk and that type of stuff. You love to have a whole bunch of people that are really great people with, off the charts makeup and work ethic and ability. But, those are hard to come by. They're really hard to come by. So sometimes you have to make some sacrifices. And I think depending on the severity of the red flags, you can decide whether or not to take that risk. That's a personal decision or a leadership decision. But it's not always cut and dry, and it's not always perfect.
Sure. And these teams, man, they're investing a lot of money in these people, whether it be a high school kid, college player. So, one thing I really love about the game, Bryan, that, and I don't agree with everything, but nobody's going to, everybody's got their own opinions, professionally, from the standpoint of, the game at one time used to be so set in its ways that didn't want any change. Baseball is one of the games that's taken a long time to change certain things, probably for the better. But there's some neat things that are happening. We talked about earlier, coaches, players, coaches, younger coaches are getting into the game. At one time, you couldn't get into a game of coaching unless you played professional baseball or you knew somebody, at the major league level. Now that's changed. One of the things that's changed is the development of the game. Today I'm watching the combine going on, that football does normally, and you're looking at the combine. And for years we've been, even at the younger levels, I think this is important at the young levels, we've been judging their talent and also judging their strength, their flexibility, their agility, all things that you need when you're young, because you can't wait till you're 18 years old to get some of these. And then at the same time, teaching the players how to get better in those areas. Now you're seeing Major League Baseball with this combine. I mean, they're testing everything from flexibility of the arms, the joints, jumping up, jumping forward, you name it, all that. This is great for the game, I think, because if it filters down, it's going to make players even better.
Yeah, I think so. I think, from a major league team perspective, you're just trying to learn something and hopefully get better at making decisions going forward. And so every piece of that information, you don't necessarily know if it's going to yield a result or an answer, but the longer you collect it, the more track record you have with it, the better chance you have of learning if it matters or not. I think probably that's one of the biggest challenges right now is, we can collect a lot of things, but we don't know necessarily if it matters. I think some teams are ahead of others in their assessment of what matters and what doesn't in that space. But that's not a simple thing to answer. I think that it can't hurt to collect those things. I think probably, there's a thought process out there that, showcase.
Hang on, folks, we got just a slight difficulty. Hang on, Bryan, you there?
Sure, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, keep going. You're good.
So I think there's an argument out there that showcase stuff has hurt baseball in a lot of ways because it's trained guys to, try and hit the ball at the ballpark or just strike guys out or throw as hard as they can and not command the ball and things like that. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I understand the idea. And so, it's like anything else. Are you training to get better to answer the test questions better, or are you training to be better all around? And it's probably not quite that simple, but I think generally speaking, more attention paid to this stuff and more time that kids spend training to get better at these things probably can't hurt. What's been wild about this WBSC stuff that I've gotten to know, and there's about 10 million things, is just how, while I think a lot of countries' problems or issues are similar, the scope is very different. And so at the end of the day, getting young kids to play, just play, period, in some country is the most important thing. And I would say even in America, because we're losing players here in Japan. But at what point does the physical testing get in the way of just letting kids grow up and play? I don't know the answer to that, but it's something to consider as we move forward.
But great point. It's almost like you're reading my mind, because I was going to ask you about nowadays, what do kids need to do more to become better players? Because, it seems to be like, it's so organized. There's, showcases, and I get all that because kids want to be showcased. But as far as playing the game and getting to be a better baseball player, what do you think young kids, like you said, here in the US and around the world, what should they be focusing on?
I can't answer that wholly. All I can say is keep playing baseball. You just don't know. I think, look, I think it's pretty rare that someone has major league ability in any country and doesn't get to the major leagues and isn't discovered, especially in the United States. So, you hear that sometimes, well, I wasn't seen or whatever. It's pretty rare when you're that good, because getting to the major leagues is really difficult. And I think probably in professional baseball, even, we tend to underestimate how hard A ball is, how hard AA is, how hard AAA is, and moving up to those levels is really difficult. The percentages and the odds are against you, even first rounders. So don't make it, and they got the most money and they're presumably going to get a lot of opportunity. So to, say, hey, you have to be on an 8U travel team sounds absurd. So there are kids who didn't peak physically until they were 18, 19, 20 years old, 22 years old. And that's when they became, their skills came out and they became a major leaguer. So I can't answer that directly. I can't say I'm in favor of a lot of the stuff that's going on at the younger levels, younger ages. But, it seems like it's a little much, but at the end of the day, your athletic ability and your, just gifts, your skills that you can't train are going to show. I think you can make yourself certainly better at a lot of things. What does that make you? Does that make you a better college player, a better professional? I don't know necessarily right now. So I admire the hustle that a lot of these kids are going through. I think it's just really hard, and we can't ever forget that. So I think anything you can do to make yourself, more athletic and keep honing your skills, the better. And generally speaking, learning how to play the game and playing the game as much as possible can't hurt.
You know what? And I think you answered, and I'll tell you why. Because when you said play the game, I think that's what's lacking. And I don't mean play games. What I think what's lacking is, just kids going out and playing on their own. I know safety is an issue, but how much did we learn? I know I learned a ton. I used to go out when I was young, and I know kids are going to say, oh, that was when you grew up. But listen, we played, 5-on-5, 8-on-8, didn't matter, because we'd close the field halfway if we had to, and hit only to the left side, or maybe sometimes to the right side only. Sure. But we learned so much because we didn't have any coaching in some ways, even though coaching helps, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, man, we're just playing, figuring it out, having some fun. And that's what you're talking about. Play the organized games, but then go out and do something on your own, even if it's just playing catch, having parents play catch with their kids, or just hitting the ball in the backyard. Sure. Where you hear all these big league stories about, I know Jimmy Lefebvre and Renee Latchman, I think they grew up together, they're playing, wiffle ball in the backyard or whatever game it was, and they became good players because of it. So I think you hit it on a button. Just play the game and just, sure. Play it more. I think we're better off. Listen, I want to get into the WBSC. I've kept you a long time, but I got to, we could be, this show could be 5 hours because you got so much knowledge and it's a lot of fun. I want to ask you, this might be a tough question because there may not be an answer on this, but you got to admire the Rays organization. I do, because, funding wise, they don't have a lot of money, but yet they're always there. Someone's going to say, well, they didn't win it all. Well, they also don't have $250 million either, payroll. What do you think makes them special? They're not going to tell us. I've got scouts and friends that I want to get on the show, but they can't tell you what's different, right? Because those are hidden secrets. Otherwise, they're giving up their secrets. But what do you think are some of the things that makes them unique? Why do they always make the playoffs? Why do they always continue to develop players, compete?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll answer this in the same way that I would talk about probably any business that's in the same boat. And I'll tie it into WBSC and talk about how, probably 80 or 90% of the federations are small federations, small market clubs, if you will.
Perfect.
I think that the Rays are fearless. and it's incredible. I admire, going back, even to Andrew Friedman and then Chaim and Eric Neander, and these guys are and all the people they've had around them that are incredibly talented. Some have left and some are still there. They're fearless. They are fearless, and it's amazing. It's amazing to watch them take chances and do things that people scoff at, people make fun of, and it works, and then they copy it 3 years later, and they're completely fearless about it. And I love that. And I think it's something that everyone should pattern kind of the behavior. Maybe not, if you don't have to take those chances. I think that's part of it, is the necessity for them to have to be fearless and take those chances. And it's not going to work all the time, and they own that. And I just admire the heck out of that whole thought process and how they go about it. So I think that's the kind of, again, as an outsider, with friends over the years that have worked there like you, that's something I've always admired. I just think that they have, guts, and, they stick to their plan and their process and their beliefs. And that's really hard. It's really hard these days, where there's so much scrutiny on every single thing you do, every decision. People can't wait to tear it down. And, they just stick with it. And sometimes it works and sometimes they don't. And they're really smart, and they just go after it. And I love that.
Hey, I want to thank everybody on Facebook, man. You guys are fantastic. We're still rocking and rolling here with Bryan. And and I'll tell you what, Bryan, I was expecting a different answer, and man, did you blow my mind, because fearless. And I'll tell you why, because I think you hit on the button, because I was thinking more, different things they do internally, with statistics, with, Rapsodo, with their pitch. I'm sure they have unique things they do there from a development standpoint, but the ability to make those changes in how they play the game, how they develop the game, and not worry about the effects of it till they see them. Wow, fearless. And this leads right into, I think, what I kind of mentioned to you when we're talking on the phone. Talk about fearless. Here you are. Yeah, you got a great background, baseball. I asked you in Slovenia, I said, well, what are you doing here? I think I didn't ask it that way. A little nicer.
I got a lot of that.
Right?
Big dumb American guy showing up in Slovenia. I wasn't selling anything. I wasn't asking for anything.
No, and you paid your own way. You did everything yourself. And that's why I'm saying fearless, because not only is it fearless to make that trip, all of a sudden now you're up for 4 positions with the WBSC, and you're not just up for a technical or a committee. You're up for president of the WBSC, executive board member at large, chairman of the baseball division, vice chairman of the baseball division. This took some cojones, so if sorry I offended anybody, but talk about fearless. So talk about that process, because you had to make that decision. Why did you make that decision? First of all, to go to Slovenia, and now to become involved and hopefully make a difference in the WBSC.
Sure. Well, someone who means a lot to me once said, I've got more guts than brains.
Well, that's true. Let me tell you.
So yeah, look, none of this was, and I apologize to any of the countries that I've talked to that are listening to this. And they're going to hear some similar stuff to what I've said to them, because a lot of people have had to explain how the heck did I get here. And really, it's totally organic. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I had, a very, very small idea. Just when you work for a team, your interaction with federation level people is really, limited to, and most times, you maybe have some relationships here and there. For the most part, it's limited to, hey, can we use your player for this under 23 tournament or the WBC or whatever. And so, it exists, but you don't necessarily know much about it. And so I had some time to figure out what I wanted to do. And very, almost naively, I didn't know that I was kind of threading a needle of need. But I sent an email to a lot of smaller federations. I'm on an advisory board for USA Baseball, but I otherwise didn't reach out to any larger federations. I just figured they don't need somebody like me. They got plenty of people that they can lean on for help. So I started reaching out to smaller federations, just offering to, set up a call and see if I could find a way to help them. I'm lucky enough that this moment I wasn't requiring any sort of, compensation or anything. I just really wanted to find an outlet to help people that needed help. I didn't know that, one, most federations don't have money, and two, I didn't realize that, the smaller federations were the majority. I also didn't realize that they didn't have a ton of help, and, would be really, not just receptive, but excited to have someone to talk to and bounce ideas off of. I had no idea. And so at the recommendation of one of the first people I talked to, they said, hey, you ought to come to Slovenia. You can meet a lot of people. Everybody in Europe will be there. I've been going to the general managers meetings, but for this winter, the first time I went was 2003. I've gone to the winter meetings since 2003. The biggest thing the thing I could most liken it to is like a more formal, more political general managers meeting. I had no idea what I was getting into. And it was wild. It was really cool for me. Again, like you said, I kind of showed up there and people were like, what's this dude doing here? And then eventually conversations flowed and it was great. And I accomplished my goal of meeting a ton of people. I really went into it with no expectations other than hoping I would learn something and meet some cool people and find a way to help some people. I didn't think it was going to lead me to a full-time job. I didn't think, really anything. I just wanted to give it a try and see. And so it was kind of, in a lot of ways, a lot of respects, an old-fashioned networking event. And so leaving there, I started having conversations with people and picking up more and more calls and trying to help some people with some projects here and there. And eventually the topic of, potentially running for office came about. And, even then I don't know that I was sure I would be nominated. I'm very, very honored and flattered to have been nominated, especially for important positions. And I think really where it came from was realizing as I started having more and more conversations that a lot of people's issues were the same. The scope of them, like I mentioned earlier, the scope is very different. We've got countries that are, solely trying to develop major league players and elite college players. And we have countries that don't have a proper field, which to me is outrageous and something we need to address. But they're trying hard. And it's been incredible to, first of all, if you're going to run for a position like this, you have to have something that can help all of these people. And I think I'm kind of uniquely situated in that regard where, I have an appreciation for the people that have the least and came from the least and have the smallest operations. And I'm, access and circles for the, wealthiest league in our sport, or one of our sports, I should say. So, I'm kind of uniquely situated in that regard with my experiences and things like that, as much as I'm a bit of an outsider to the governing body space. It's just kind of a different view and a different perspective, but also an appreciation for all these people. And so figuring out how, what happened was I kept having conversations with people. And every time I get off the phone with a country, I would feel inspired and energized. I talked to 3 different countries today, and I had the same feeling every single time where I find myself making notes and man, I could really help these people with this or connect them with this, or, this country and this country are having the same issue. And how can we address that wholesale? And I kind of, accidentally figured out that there wasn't a lot of cohesion and there wasn't a lot of kind of, collaboration between countries. I don't think it's an accident there are more women in leadership in softball, but I found softball federations more likely to talk to each other and help each other than maybe some of the baseball. But generally speaking, there were a lot of people out there, working on the same problem, and they could use a little bit of guidance and structure. And a lot of my career has been, taking ideas and process and kind of implementing and executing. And, so for someone who is kind of structure and process oriented in a lot of ways, when I started having these calls and realizing this, I kind of, had a Fred Sanford moment of like, oh my goodness, we need to pull these people together and get this thing rolling. And that was kind of the inspiration, I think, in a lot of ways, just, finding out that I accidentally backed into something here that, turns out I'm super passionate about it. It kind of threads the needle of all the things that are important to me, whether it's, look, I've grown to appreciate softball and baseball 5 and the people associated with that. But, I've committed my career to baseball to this point. So it's one of our sports that I've committed my whole career to. It's helping, cultural development. I love learning. I love going to different countries and learning about the people and kind of how they go about their business. So learning that. So personally and professionally, that's been nice. And then also, youth development. I think people would be lying to themselves, anybody who works in Major League Baseball, if at some point in your career, you didn't wonder, what good am I doing in the world? And so, this kind of, I kind of backed into this world that, really kind of combines all these things that I'm passionate about. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I can tell you is that once I started having these conversations, I couldn't shake them. And I just kept thinking about ways I could help. And at the end of the day, the idea of helping so many people that, could use help. And there's a lot of positives that exist already, in the WBSC and kind of their growth over the last, 7-8 years. But how can I help? And how can I help change that and make that better for the people involved? And that's been inspiring for me. And that's how I've gotten to this point.
That sounds awesome. And speaking about doing things for people around the world, let's give a shout out to Michael Johnston, our good friend Michael, remember, was with us in Slovenia. He was clapping, so he's giving you a lot of claps there. Hey, in order for these 4 positions, in order to go for them, you don't have to mention who, but what you have to have a country who puts your name into that spot.
Yeah, I had to be nominated by a federation, and as someone who's not an actual member of a federation, I'm a complete interloper here.
Right.
So I had to be nominated, and I hoped that I would be nominated, but I wasn't completely sure that I would be, and so I wasn't something I talked to too many people about. I was hoping that organically it would come about, but ultimately I was lucky enough to get nominated by Norway and Georgia.
And you know what? And I'm not the only one. There's going to be a lot of people out there. I hope you get one of these 4 positions because, being with the WBSC 20 years, you will add a lot to really help us into, having a larger goal and continue to develop to what, WBSC has been doing up till now, which they've done a great job, but it can keep growing and growing and growing. And I think you said it really well, help a lot of these smaller countries that really need a lot of help. As you know, we're big also, and I say we, ISG Baseball and Baseball for Good, in Eastern Europe. I think that's an important area, but they're not just Eastern Europe. You got Africa, you got a lot of countries who need a lot of help. Speaking about help, and you kind of addressed some of this, but I think I want to take the questions from Syed Shah from Pakistan. It says, if Bryan became president or chairman of WBSC, what would be the top 3 main concerns or priorities that you would start working on?
Wow, good question. Coming with the high heat right away. So I mean, look, I think whoever's in charge, the maybe priorities 1 through 100 is the Olympics. Making sure that baseball and softball solidify their place in the Olympics going forward. I've really grown to understand how that can impact funding, which ultimately is what everybody needs, is some level of funding or more funding, the better. So I think from an awareness standpoint, from a funding access to funds standpoint, there may not be a greater issue than making sure that these sports are in the Olympics going forward. I think, the next turn at this is Los Angeles in 2028. And, golly, if you can't get in with those sports in the United States, and I worry going forward. And so I think that's a big priority for whoever's in charge, is to make sure that outside of that, I think, there's, again, I think there are definitely positives going on, but I think generally speaking, my goal would be to try and help as many federations as possible. I think, one of the ideas I have is to create kind of a tiered system of bucketing the federations, and obviously there are breadwinners and the people that are generating revenue for all of us. How do we make sure they're taken care of and find ways to make them happy and continue to grow and thrive? Elite player development, that type of stuff. But also find ways to put money back in the pockets or save money for all of our smaller federations and really focus on development. Which I think is all tied together. I think there are ways to help a lot of countries without just handing a check, whether that's, unifying ideas, structure process to get people kind of organized, helping to unify costs and streamline them for them, finding ways to be intentional with, sponsorships that can offset the costs of these federations. I think every country outside of about maybe 7 to 10 has issues with equipment. I have some ideas about that, but I don't know how we can really solve that. Baseball equipment's expensive everywhere in the world, and getting it to places that it's not a native sport is expensive and tricky. So there are a lot of ways to try at that. I certainly don't think I'm the smartest person to come through here and the only person that's had ideas in any of these regards, but that is going to be a big challenge. I think equipment, putting it in the hands of kids to make it more accessible, make it more a part of the culture is going to be a big push. But I think generally speaking, finding ways to help federations grow. I think with the tiered system I have in mind, it's giving people a plan for growth, tailoring it to each country. I think getting a very clear picture of where every country is in terms of, their ability to, their participation, the number of players they have at what levels, at what sports, their number of coaches, official scorers, umpires, facilities, equipment, that type of stuff. How competitive are they internationally? Are they ready for international competition? At what levels? Figure out a way to kind of delineate and kind of break these people up, and then give the smaller federations a plan for growth. I feel like currently, it's a big haul for people to get a federation, and then once they do, I've found a lot of people are kind of on their own to figure it out and figure out their own growth. And what I've loved about this journey I've been on is meeting people all over the world that are so enthusiastic and so passionate about the growth. And all of them have these different ways of attacking it specific to their country. So working with these people to identify how we're going to help them grow specifically, incentivize them to grow and get better and get bigger and help these people along. But I think really using the expertise of a lot of the people that already exist, whether it's, business leaders that happen to be a part of our federations, or people that are on a lot of the commissions that exist. There's a lot of really great people with a lot of great experience that I don't know that they have maybe the voice or opinion that they could. So really helping people to grow. And I think we're only going to be as good as our weakest federation. But looking at these smaller federations as a chance to grow our participation base, also potentially our revenue base, I think is a great thing. And so at the end of the day, it's just trying to help everybody for the greater good, and relying on each other to do a lot of that work too.
And I want to give a shout out to Syed because he's done a great job in Pakistan. Earlier you mentioned, other countries like Iraq, Iran, and others in the area who need a lot of help. I was in Tunisia. They are so passionate about the game there. They just need some assistance. I'm with you on all that. I want to give a shout out to also Randall Arms, who got hired as a pitching coach with Pakistani national teams. And boy, he's been everywhere. And Randall does it for the, again, the love of the game. These are all people on Facebook who just love the game. We got, we're talking about Belize. Tony Smith loves the game. I can go down the list of, everybody I see on here. Michael, we talked about, and I wish I could go through everybody. There's so many people watching. I want to take you back a second. I want to get your opinion on this, because the Olympics, you're right, is so important because federations are funded according to the Olympics, right? If the sport's in the Olympic sport, federation gets money in that particular sport. And this really hurts the small countries when baseball's not in the Olympics. It's not an easy answer, but what's the separator here? Because everybody's tried. What do you think is something that needs to possibly be looked at to get baseball back into the Olympics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm not in those rooms. I can't say specifically. I think if I was, in that room in whatever regard, it's trying to find the, like you said, the inflection points of what's holding us back, what's, preventing us from getting over the hump.
Mm-hmm.
And where do we need to focus our energy? If it's, showing that we have, increasing international competition to show that there's interest, and not just from, the top 20 or 30 or 40 countries, but showing that there's true interest in growing this internationally, competing internationally. If it's, we have to get to a certain number of participants, and how do we do that? I don't know exactly. You're right. A lot of the things I say, I don't pretend to be the first person that's thought about it or prioritized it. I think that this is a very, very big issue, and it has been for a long time. Thankfully in Japan, we're in, and that was a great thing. Hopefully that can carry forward. But I think it's figuring out exactly what the touch points are and how do we get there. I feel lucky, again, whatever happens, to possibly be able to help. Given my background, I've spent my career trying to spend owners' money, and get them to understand why something I'm doing that may not show immediate returns is probably good for us, as an organization, or good for us as a game, better, treatment of kids or staff or whatever it is. So I feel like I've spent my whole career trying to convince people to part with their money and with no clear immediate return. So I think that's something I can help with, on top of just having, some connections to that, but there's no guarantees. And I think at the end of the day, you have to just, do your best to understand what the sticking points are, and how can we address them? How can we, clearly try and get over that hump for everybody? And yeah, like you said, I've learned that, you're at a federation, whether you have a team that can compete at the Olympic level or not, being able to go to your Olympic federation with the support of the WBSC and say, hey, the WBC comes in and says, hey, we're with these people. We're trying really hard, and we're trying to do this thing together, and we're with them, and this is going to be a legitimate thing. And then getting money from the Olympic Federation or committee in your country to help you with development, I think is the key.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that hopefully you get one of these positions, because like you said, you're not in it yet, but once you get in it, you start to understand it, ask those questions. and now be able to bring your business baseball background into it, along with all your contacts with the owners, Major League Baseball, but just in general, corporate sponsors, possibly, there's so many things that you could bring to the table to help. And the more people we have like that, the better, obviously. So I think that's awesome. I think that it's a great thing. And speaking of business, it's got to be run. You were talking about spending money for owners. I mean, that's important, because how you spend your money and how you hold people accountable is critical to all this as far as developing the sport worldwide.
Sure. Yeah, I think anybody who's asked for money from somebody, realizes your best path to getting that money or that funding is by being able to show a clear plan with what you're going to do with it. And even that sometimes doesn't always work. But I think, having an idea with what you want to do with it. Look, I certainly can't guarantee more funding from anybody, but that's a totally separate issue. But I think generally speaking, putting money back into our federations for development purposes is critical. These people need help, and there are a lot of them, and we're really lucky that we have. It's probably no different in hockey with, you have teams or federations, rather, countries that are their own businesses and they make quite a bit of money, or they do well enough. And that's incredible. That's great. You hope we can all get to that point. But how can we help these people that aren't in that spot yet? And how can we get them there? And part of it is investing in their development to help get them over the hump and get them growing and get them moving.
Excellent. Bryan, is there anything, I'm sure because you put a lot of thought process into this, is there anything out there now that, things that you've thought about that you said, man, this would be really good for the WBSC to do in the future, plans you have that if you either get the president's position or the baseball chairman's position, things that can really help us grow the game internationally?
Sure. I think, I've probably got, 50 pages of notes that came and ideas that came from talking to all these people, whether it's about, revenue generation or equipment or coaching or, education, and all the tie-ins we could do there with funding, sponsorship, revenue, all that kind of stuff. So I can't really summarize it all quickly. But what I could say is I think using a lot of the people we have around the world that are so passionate and they're working so hard. And I just can't say that enough. I'm really lucky I feel like I've created a lot of support with some help, but also on my own, just reaching out to people organically because I want to learn and I want to know what's going on and I want to figure out if I can help. And I accidentally have created a lot of support for myself, from an election standpoint, with all the people that I've spoken to, and it's been incredible. Do I think everybody's going to vote for me that I've talked to? No. But I think I've spent a lot of time and I haven't asked for votes because I want to learn what's going on. I want to develop a relationship and a connection, and I want to learn how I can help. I hope that bleeds over into being elected to something, but generally speaking, what I would say is I've met some of the coolest people that are so into this and are devoting their free time, their money, their own money to travel to events. They're paying for teams to travel internationally, some of their federation level teams for competitions. They're paying to show up at congresses or conferences. They're paying for some of their coaches out of their own pocket to get better at coaching or get, certified as an umpire or something like that. These people are paying their own money or using what little they have and getting creative. I probably have more baseballs in my office than some of these countries have in their country, but they're running programs on them and kids are learning how to play our games, baseball, softball, baseball 5. It's incredible. It's incredible. Some of the people that I've met that have been just so energizing and inspiring. And so I look forward to, whatever capacity, hopefully giving those people more of a voice and a place at the table with the people that are already there that have already run successful businesses or successful federations. It's just a really cool thing. Again, you can kind of probably sense I'm such a nerd about this, but it's just such a wide range of people culturally, but also just, there's so many people that have done so many different things, whether in sport or in business, that we have access to within our own ranks. And how do we engage those people for the greater good and help each other and incentivize federations to help each other along the way? And maybe that means, you are left on your own instead of having to travel to play a tournament in a country in order to qualify. Maybe the fact that you're helping out some smaller federations with coaching or equipment or money, you get points for that, or, you qualify automatically as well, whatever. There are ways that we can get creative to, help each other out. And I think that's something that maybe that's the next step for the WBSC is really finding ways to help everybody grow and make us all better as a unit.
Yeah, well said, man. I'll tell you what, I'll give again, a shout out to the WBSC because I've been with them 22 years on a technical committee. And so I've seen some growth, and they've really done a great job, with the technology aspect. That's really helped a lot, but we're raising money because, I remember 15 years ago, we weren't raising any money. And it was given to us by obviously the Olympic Committee, but there wasn't really a lot of marketing put into there. The Premier 12 wasn't there where it brought in a lot of money. The 12U World Championships in Taiwan bringing in money. The media aspect, the marketing, it's really grown. They've really done a really good job, but it obviously needs to get bigger. It's the leader in international baseball. It's going forward, and we just need to keep adding good people like yourself. I think it would really help. I want to close it off with this, and feel free. We don't have to close it off. You got anything else we want to say? We could keep going, but the reason I want to close it off with this is because I've probably talked about it on the show more than anything, and because I believe this in all heart. And I've said this. I don't care if you're a youth league program. I don't care if you're a high school, international team, clubs, you name it. Our goal is to grow the game. In order to grow the game, kids got to enjoy it, get better at it. So that's a fact, because if you don't get better, you're not going to play it, and you're going to quit at a certain age. And look, people make excuses. Oh, at 14, they're going to do something else. Yeah, I agree. There's other things to do. But if you love baseball and you're doing well, you ain't quitting. You're going to keep playing something you enjoy, right? It's fun. Saying all that, it's a long-term thing. We want kids to stay in the game long-term. We don't want to just get them in the game and then out. And I really believe, bottom line, if you don't have good coaching, you're not growing anything, because what stops kids from going forward 99% of the time is bad coaching. And not that they're blaming the coach. It's that they're just not doing the right things, and it's not fun anymore. Practice is boring. It's not fun. I don't like the person who's coaching. You hear that a lot. And, folks send me all the emails saying I'm wrong, but I'll send you all the facts of all the emails I get of the kids that are saying that. And they've done many studies on this. So coaching development, education, and there's so many different levels, because it's broad all over the world. You can't just paint, throw one paintbrush on it and say, here's how you coach everybody. Well, because you don't coach everybody the same. I mean, an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, baseball 5, everything's different. How important is that to you? Because I just don't see the game growing without an educational program.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think
that's my soapbox. Sorry.
Well, no, but I would say my first reaction to that is that's probably an issue in a handful of countries. I don't know how much of an issue. Well, kids getting burnt out by bad coaching and things like that, or over aggressive tactics. I don't know that that's a universal thing, because we have so many countries that lack coaches and lack kids playing. And so how can kids in some of these countries get so fatigued by it? But
let me stop you there real quick. It's the only time I want to stop just for a second, because I think you brought up another good point. So let me rephrase that. Excellent point. I agree. So here's the facts then. With those countries, you need coaching if you're going to grow the game. So in other words, you need to attract parents or whoever it may be to coach the game, so they can go out and get more kids to play. And it's kind of a cycle that they keep them in the game. So you also, in those countries, you still need good coaching. You just got to get them. You don't have much.
Yeah. And I look, this is we could spend 2 hours talking about this topic, so I'll try and boil it down as best I can. So I think I think you have to, again, I think a lot of this is going to be tailored specifically to what a country needs. And I think it's understanding exactly where that country is and what do they need. There are some countries, the United States is certainly one of them, and there are plenty of others where we can afford to be more kind of picky, choosy, judicious about who we allow to coach or at what levels and things like that. There are other countries, we just need whoever wants to do it. Whoever has a passion for it, whoever has the time or the ability to not have to work a second job, and they can dedicate their time to helping kids play and learn, whether they're certified or not. I know that's an issue in some countries where you have to have a phys ed degree, for example, in order to coach formally. I think that should be something we need, or very picky about in each, or specific about, I should say, and intentional about in each country. We can afford to be more kind of careful with it in certain countries than others. Most of the world just needs coaches and need people that are enthusiastic about helping kids getting better and helping kids learn these sports. So I want to start with that. But I think in general, there are a lot of ways we can do it. I would love to see a lot more kind of free online coaching access and forums and things like that to make use of people that are willing to donate their time to help educate our coaches worldwide. Do even if it's continental, using translators and things like that as best we can, but find ways to really help our coaches get better on our dime as a WBSC. I think there are plenty of, whether it's trying to revive some coaching envoy programs or revive, coach exchanges and things like that, or make better use of those with some of the pro leagues or colleges in the United States, Japan, Australia that are playing more advanced baseball, getting creative with those types of things. I think one thing that I think a lot of countries have started to focus on this, and I think it's really smart, is, placing an emphasis on their kids getting to play softball and baseball in college, coming back to their country with an advanced degree that hopefully will help their careers, two, a better softball and baseball knowledge or IQ by playing at a higher level internationally, and then three, coming back and having a desire to coach and help the next generation. I think that is not necessarily a novel thought, but I think really putting an emphasis on that. And I think I have different ideas on how to kind of develop coaching, but I think putting an emphasis on that will really kind of expand your coaching network, a little more quickly. Finding ways to, in some of these countries that have requirements in terms of a phys ed degree and things like that, maybe we waive that for people who played in college or who played professionally in baseball or softball, and they're allowed to come and coach full bore, and that's essentially their degree by going away and doing it. So I think what happens too with players, certainly in baseball, that sign internationally, it's really hard, and sometimes they come back and they don't have their degree, and they're 23, 24, 25 years old. They've got to earn a living. So they've got to go to school or go make a living. They don't necessarily have the means to then start coaching as well. So if we can put more people in a position to have their degrees when they come back home, or have their experience as a player count towards their profession, I think that could make a little bit of hay too. I could talk about this for hours.
No, but well said, man. You brought it up well, and I'll tell you why. Because technology-wise, coaching seminars around the world could be done so well. Like you said, in continental regions and all that. The other part I think you brought up, I thought was excellent, was some countries just need coaching, just need people to come out and help, and then we can start educating them a little bit, right? Give them resources, because it's they're coming out to volunteer. Let's help them out, like you said. And then you've got countries who are doing pretty good that don't need it as much because they have their own programs. I mean, a shout out to Canada, Australia, the Holland, Cuba. They got some great educational programs. And there's other countries. Italy's got a good program. I mean, and so on and so forth. So I think you said it great. Bryan, hey, man, I took up a lot of your time. Looking at the clock here. It's really rolling. Is there, I think one way to end this basically is there anything else that you wanted to mention to, and I'm proud because we've got over 100 countries that listen to the show. I wish everybody in the country was listening. I know sometimes only 4 or 5 people in each country, but at least we've got certain people listening. Anything you want to leave them with, whether it be in baseball in general or WBSC and so forth?
Man, that's broad. No, I'm honored to have been on the show. I really appreciate you and what you do for the baseball community and softball communities that want to learn. I love listening to your show because you have a lot of interesting people on of all walks of life that really have a lot to offer, and you can always learn something. I've learned something on every single time I've listened to your podcast. I hope that I added to that. I won't be presumptuous and assume I did. I hope I did. But I'm honored to be a part of that. I'm honored to be a part of this whole WBSC process. And it really, I'm sure I'll say this again at some point to people, but it's really been an experience of a lifetime to, in some respects, completely come out of the upper deck and now all of a sudden be nominated for these really unique positions and have a chance to possibly impact a lot of people in the world. Really, that's special to me. It means a lot to me. I'm flattered by all the support I've gotten and all the encouragement I've gotten from all over the world. Every continent has been just, incredible. The people I've talked to and how supportive they've been. Whether that leads to an election or not, I don't know, but it's been wonderful to meet these people and learn about what's going on and find out ways to help. And as you said, no matter what happens, I'm going to be involved in this space going forward because I've made the connections now and found specific things I can help people with. But I've also found something that for me personally is really fulfilling and really fun. So I look forward to being a part of that. But I'm just really thankful to have this platform to be able to talk about it and to have met all these people and been a part of this world for the time I have been, and excited about what that means going forward.
Awesome, man. That's fantastic. And I got to tell you, I was excited about this. This might be one of the few shows that I actually prepared for. And over 300. Usually, I just like to rock and roll and just go with the flow. And folks, we don't have questions and answers. We don't know what the questions are going to be. We just kind of go with it. And I'll tell you what, it was a fantastic show. There was so much information. That's what I'm saying. This could have been a 4 or 5 hour show. So again, Bryan, man. Thank you. I wish you the best. I hope you get one of these positions because I look forward to working with you somewhere down the road. God bless you. And we're watching the elections. It's July 4th, I believe, and we'll get it. We'll get the announcements out when they happen.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate it. I'm excited about it.
All right, folks. Bryan Minniti, thank you. And also special thanks to Brian Crock, our producer with the Lineup Media Group. Special thanks to everybody in the U.S. and around the world and ESPN Honolulu. Aloha. Thank you, folks. Don't forget, do your best, share the show, help us out. We just ask that you get the show out to everybody in the game of baseball, whether it be players, coaches, or parents. Doesn't matter who it is in the game. And anytime you have somebody that you like to, see or listen to on the podcast, send us an email. Let us know who it is and why that person should be on the show. It doesn't matter who it is, as long as they can help the game of baseball, we'll have them on the show. Email me, caliendo19@gmail.com. All right, folks, remember, stay healthy, stay safe. God bless you. And we'll see you on the next show. Bye, everybody.